I've been loving this iPad for photo editing, though.
It's great.
I know you use yours for that too. And like the other day, I was taking pictures at that Christmas Eve service and needed to deliver a few, short notice for them to post that day. And it was really nice. I didn't take my laptop with me.
Oh, yeah. You just plug it in, drop them in, boom, 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 done.
Yep. I brought a USB compact CF Express reader for the X-H2S.
Mm-hmm.
And I planned on using an SD reader on the XT30, but I couldn't get the battery door open because of the Peak Design clip.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just plugged that one in with USB. But yeah, it's super easy to import stuff. And they've finally, I mean, I know it's been this way for a while, but when I used Lightroom Mobile in the past, you had to import your pictures to Lightroom before you could edit them. And they've changed that now. So like on the iPad Lightroom, you can just it just sees your photo library and you can just edit stuff from your photo library without having to import it first, which is really cool.
Yeah, that you don't have to actually import it into Lightroom. You can just see the photos on your device and edit them.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. That's cool.
Yeah. That was really nice for me because I think I'm probably going to end up doing most of this editing on my computer just because it's a bigger screen. I'm more used to it and all that. And so it's like, I don't want to set up this whole thing on the iPad to do it. And so I just wanted to be able to grab a couple of those pictures and edit them. It's really nice and easy.
That's good.
Yeah.
I learned that. So I connect my XH2S to my iPad frequently with just the USB-C cable to pull in the pictures rather than having to pull out my CF Express reader.
Do you feel like that's as fast as the CF Express reader?
I don't think it matters. If I'm just, somewhere and I only have my iPad, I'm pulling pictures off. It's like, if it's twice as long, it's still less than 10 minutes. Okay. It's like, instead of 30 seconds, it's a minute kind of thing.
Okay.
But I have learned that you have to have the right cable with me because some USB-C cables just don't communicate between the camera and the iPad.
That is one of the most frustrating things about USB-C is that you have this one connector that has 10 different types of cables that do different things, and you gotta have the right one.
And I'm like, the one that comes with the iPad is USB 2, and it's a charge cable.
Yeah.
And that one works. And then I have a USB 3.1 really long charge cable. That one, no, it's not Thunderbolt. But then I have this Anchor that I know I've used for data before. So it is a data cable, and it's a charge cable, but it doesn't work for transferring photos, and I don't know why.
That's annoying.
I have no idea why.
I just want there to be a color coding or some little symbol or something. If it's a charge-only cable, I want to be able to know that by looking at the cable.
The whole thing's an absolute mess.
It really is.
But there was something recently that I shot where I think it was just a lot of Christmas pictures, and I didn't want... No, it was those dog portraits that I took. I only wanted to keep the non-blurry ones and not get everything sucked into my Lightroom and into my photo backup workflow.
Sure.
And so on the iPad, I turned off sync, imported the photos, cleared them, going through and flagging, like, dislike, and then I deleted all the dislikes, and then I turned on sync.
Oh.
And that worked fairly effectively to keep the photo library clean, but still use Lightroom for the filtering features.
Nice. That's cool.
When you do get around to working on those photo edits, there are still features in Lightroom Normal, not Lightroom Classic, that are on the computer that aren't on the iPad. Specifically, they added these AI denoising and upresing features.
Oh, interesting.
That are actually really good for those Fuji files.
Yeah.
And if there's a picture that you really like that you just want to upres it so that there's more detail, the upres is super good. And if you have a really high ISO image that you want to denoise, or it's you can't quite get it sharp how you want it, one of the problems with those, as you know, with those X-Trans files in Lightroom is that when you start cranking the sharpness, it sharpens the noise almost. It just takes all the grain and the detail and just sharpens everything. Whenever you do the DNG conversion and the AI noise reduction, even if you use just a little bit, once it converts it to a DNG, the sharpening works way better.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's a good to know. If you're on a computer and using Lightroom regular and you're working with X-Trans photos and you want to you have ISO 6400 image, do a little bit of the AI denoising, and then you can bump the sharpness a little bit, and you can. It's incredible as far as the difference between what you were working with before and what you're working with after in that DNG.
Okay, I'll have to give that a try.
My other tip is that if you're going to sharpen your photos because I know you don't edit a lot of raw photos with Fujifilm because JPEGs are so good, but let it do sharpening on export for your JPEGs. Like take your sharpness down to 0, and then on the export screen, you can select to sharpen on export for screens, and it will do the sharpening for the JPEG on export. And that is a different function than whenever you're doing it. It has a preview for the RAW in Lightroom.
Interesting. And that works better, you think?
Yeah, I think it does.
Huh.
So
I wonder why that's different. And I wonder why, like why do you have to know these weird little tips, you know?
It's because Fujifilm is not popular enough for all those Adobe cats, and they just haven't figured out how to deal with those RAF files and extrans in the correct way.
I guess. Sure is a shame that Capture One's ending their free version. That's going to be a bummer for people that use that.
Yeah. If Capture One had a equivalent set of features and is easy to use for me as Lightroom, I would use that instead, I guess. But like, there's not really a good library feature. That's the whole reason I'm sticking with Lightroom, is because I can manage my photo library in Lightroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Woof.
I mean, doing stuff like that is a big ask for any company, because the library stuff also means they have like a cloud sync and all that. And those are big features that require a lot of infrastructure and stuff. So it's not surprising they don't have it.
Yeah.
But
they're discontinuing the Capture One Express stuff.
I assumed that meant the Fuji one too.
Yes, but you can still get a RAW converter from them for free. And so they're letting you have that. If you're a Fuji person, you can still go to Capture One and get like the RAW converter thing.
Okay.
And that will work, and that won't cost you anything. But if you want to use actual Capture One, you got to pay for it. But they were feature locking for a long time anyway. And if you're doing a lot of photo editing, it's kind of, might as well just use the paid version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shame.
I don't have a segue. We're still like pre-show here.
Yeah,
I guess.
we are. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
I was on Threads yesterday, and in between all of the posts about people telling me that I can long press things to do extra whatevers.
Like in Threads?
In Threads, they're like, if you long press the share button, it opens up a different share sheet. And that was every post all day yesterday. Like, it was ridiculous.
It's kind of bad if you have a platform and people are only talking about, like, how to use the platform in ways you don't know about. Kind of like us talking about Lightroom and its various sharpening features. Like, shouldn't they make these things self-evident so that you don't need to like share this arcane knowledge with everybody? I don't know.
I don't think they probably haven't thought of that. That's a really good idea. Let's write a letter.
We should.
Anyway, between all those posts, someone was like, "Check out this bad boy, Merry Christmas to me," kind of thing, and it was a Fujifilm Natura. I can only read this word. Nature with an A. Classica. And I was like, this
sounds like an espresso machine, but what is it actually?
Well, it's obviously a film camera, Daniel. I don't even know why you have to ask anymore.
It could have been a film rather than a film camera.
It is a film. You can get Fujifilm Natura 1600, which is a 1600 ISO film, which was probably what people used in these cameras.
That would make sense.
And so I haven't gone like full Lucas on this yet, but it's probably going to happen. And I'm starting to think that maybe this is my next film camera.
Oh,
maybe we'll see. So there's a bunch of them, because there's like the Natura. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm saying it so wrong. Natura. Oh, jeez, you're right. I should just lean into the southern accent on that one, then it'll be fine. So I'm looking at the Natura. And there's the Classica, and there's the NS and the S, and there's a bunch of different variations. But what's super cool about this camera is that they have a really like good, highly sensitive photometer on it.
Okay.
And the whole point of it was to take naturally lit photos in the dork.
Interesting. So it's got you said ISO 1600,
so
which is kind of fast, but not super fast.
So it is a point and shoot, and it will auto expose up to 1600 ISO film, which is pretty dark. And then also some of these There's one specifically that has a 35 millimeter 1.9 lens on it.
Oh, so that's pretty
fast.
Yeah, that's pretty fast.
That one, and I don't know if the Classica will do it. The Classica has a zoom lens. It's a 28 or a 35 that then jumps to like a 58 or something. So it's the same. Like we talked about this on like a lot of different film cameras in that circa year where it was a prime lens that has 2 focal lengths, and it will zoom, but it'll only zoom to the second one, and it'll be like 28 and 58 or 35 and 70 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it'll double the aperture. This is the same thing. It's 2.8 to 5.6, and it's got two focal lengths. So that was the one that I was looking at on Threads. But as I dove into this, the whole point of it was that if you put in ISO 1600 film into the camera, then it's like, cool, we're doing this. And you can set it to automatically expose up 2 stops. So it'll push the film for you up to 2 stops. So that's 32/6400 if you want it. And then also it will disable the flash.
Interesting.
And so like you go into Natura mode and your flash turns off and you push 2 stops and you put 1600 ISO film, and you can take low light photos with your point and shoot film camera that are all naturally lit. So you can get these cool, like whatever lighting effects, and the auto exposure still works because it's a point and shoot and it has a really good photo sensor in it.
Sounds like it'd be pretty good for taking pictures indoors. You know, parties or something like that.
It's like the whole thing with this natural light.
Pretty cool.
And if you could still buy Natura, whatever 1600 film, which they discontinued, then it'd be perfect for this.
Yeah. I imagine with stuff like that, since it has a light meter and all that, I imagine it can just tell you if the scene is too dark, right?
Yeah, like the one that I have it'll beep at you, as you learned recently. So yes, a lot of them are like that. They'll flash a light in the viewfinder that tells you like it's too dark or too light, or turn on the flash. You don't have to normally. But, that's typically how they do. They kind of alert you, and then you can make a decision, but most of them are just point and shoot.
So does this Fuji one have a flash?
Yes, it does have a flash.
That's not very Natura of it.
Well, it like if you're shooting in the dark mode in like 1600 ISO, it'll disable the flash. It'll lock you wide open at 1.9 for the S model, and it'll like do whatever it can to like, okay, if I want to. It wants to freeze motion, so like it will try not to bring the shutter speed too low, and it'll just like underexpose things if it has to, and that sort of thing. It's kind of like it knows it's shooting in the dark, and so it makes decisions in that way. Yeah, which I feel like a lot of these older film point and shoots are not as maybe as intelligent or thoughtful about that shooting mode. Yeah,
it's kind of cool that they've optimized it for the different things. I mean, anytime you have an auto mode, you're making some sort of trade off, and it's cool that they've kind of like they've aimed it at a certain thing.
That's the Classica.
Oh, it kind of has that aesthetic of a Blackmagic cinema camera, like the old one, the one from 2012.
Yeah, I could see that. It's like 50 times smaller.
Yeah, but like it's got that same look to it. Sort of.
No grip, just like a flat, very sleek.
Yeah. How much do those things run?
Somewhere between $300 and $600 used on eBay.
Okay.
So I mean they're
fairly expensive, but not wildly expensive.
Yeah, not wildly expensive, but sought after because of what they can do.
Yeah.
I don't think I can buy ISO 1600 film.
They don't make that anymore?
I've been looking. I haven't been looking specifically for 1600, but I'm like, what's the highest ISO I can get? I don't know. I like most of the stuff, it's like 800 is about as good as you're going to get. I think ISO 1600 just is so niche that's not a film stock.
It's probably pretty grainy.
Oh yeah, it's definitely pretty grainy. Maybe. I don't know.
That's what you're in it for, though.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Crank the grain. That's what I say. I don't say that. But since we're talking about it, I shot a roll through that Minolta Himatic AF2.
Yeah. You showed that camera to me the other day.
I know you were super jealous. And you were like, Lucas, I got to get me one of these. I'm going to start shooting film just like you.
That thing is huge. It's so much. I had the XT30 with me at the time. It's so much bigger than the XT30.
It is not small. It's not giant. Like the length and width dimension, or the height and width dimension, or maybe the same as my Canon AE1.
Yeah,
maybe a little taller. Like it's not small, but it's not like heavy.
Yeah, I mean it's not enormous, but it doesn't feel like a compact little pocket camera.
Yeah, it was the 80s.
People had bigger pockets back then.
There are smaller versions of these cameras out there, and so I don't know. I'm really excited.
You'll get
about
one
it.
Eventually.
I have put my film in for development. I opted not to develop it myself because I knew that I was gonna do it wrong, and then I wouldn't know if I did the film development wrong or if the camera was broken.
Yeah, you want to test one variable at a time.
And you accused me of using this really old expired Superior film.
I did.
400, and
Yep.
I didn't use it. It's still sitting in the fridge. So take that. I've fought and won against my demons,
Mhm.
and that film is still unused. I did actually get all of my kit.
Yeah,
in the mail.
You just said that you chose to submit that role for development instead of developing it yourself, which makes it sound like you could develop a roll of film yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah, so when I was listening back to the last episode, I realized that I hadn't gone all in yet.
Oh yeah, a lot has happened since the last episode of the podcast.
As I continue down on my film journey, I've done all the math, and it's like getting like C41 process film developed. It's like $8 or whatever to develop a roll, but then you have to either scan it yourself with a $300 scanner or whatever, or you have to get them to scan it in a fancier scanner, and that's usually $10.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're paying, $18 to $20 just to get it developed and scanned, plus the $16 or $8 it costs to get the film, depending on what you shoot. I mean, at the low end, we're talking $26 for one roll of film.
That really adds up. That's a lot of money.
It's so expensive. But once you have all of the development stuff, I think we talked about this part before. I can't remember. It's like $1 a roll, because you can get a 32 count or 24 count or whatever. You can get your chemicals, and it can develop like 24 rolls of film or whatever. And like in aggregate, it comes down to like about $1 for chemical cost. Which like they expire over time. Like if you don't shoot like 20 rolls in a year or 6 months, then it's going to cost you more because your chemicals are going to go out and you're going to have to get more chemicals. But in aggregate, $1 a roll.
And I mean, plus your time.
Mhm.
But for you, going to the camera store takes time as well. And
Yeah.
it can also be an expensive trip for other reasons. So
True. So that's kind of my thought is like the time I would have taken to develop the film is probably the same amount of time I would have taken to go there, drop the stuff off, and then go back again later to pick up my negatives. And so I'm like, well, that's, an equal amount of time. And the cost is like way, way less. Now I just need to get a scanner, and someone is supposed to be sending me a scanner for free.
that's pretty cool.
And so I'm like, once I locked that in, they're like, oh yeah, that's just sitting in a box over here. I'll send you that scanner. I was like the last thing I needed. And then I bought all the chemicals and all the tools and everything. And I have like this cute little box, and it's got like all of my stuff in it, and my goggles and my Patterson tank and my little fish tank heater. I'm ready to go.
So it's going to be a while before you actually do this, though, right? Because you have to shoot a roll of film on a known good camera before you can actually.
Right. So I'm like a few days away from seeing the pictures out of the Hymatic.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I confirm that thing actually can focus and can expose, which those are the big unknowns, they're probably all going to be out of focus. Who knows? If that works, I'm going to put the roll in the Hymatic. If it doesn't, I'm going to put it into the 8.1, and I'll shoot another roll, and then I'll start developing my own film. But the scanner hasn't showed up yet.
Yeah.
So if the scanner never shows up, then I'm going to have to figure something else out.
Mm-hmm. You might have to buy a scanner.
That's not out of the question. Oh boy, I'm in it, Daniel.
Yeah,
I'm all the way in now.
You're in pretty deep, I would say.
So
I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes when you actually do this process.
I'm super pumped about it.
Yeah.
I'm very excited, and I'm dying to do some development, and I just have to keep waiting.
Yeah.
I feel like in the modern era of everything being right now, there's not much anticipation, and I feel like a lot of the, like, for instance, a lot of the excitement around Christmas is out of the anticipation of Christmas Day. And I think film photography, like Christmas, has a lot of built-in anticipation, because you have to wait. Like, you took the picture, you're not going to see that picture until you shoot the other 35 pictures and then get it developed and then get it scanned and then realize it was a terrible picture. But it'll have been so long between the two. I'm just saying that it builds anticipation, which then has a higher payoff than normal photography.
You can listen to this podcast to learn about the magic of film photography.
It's like Christmas. Christmas magic is film photography magic, Daniel.
I don't know about that.
You heard it here first. I did consider that back in the day, like before digital photography, you would have to like, you had to shoot the pictures and then you have to like get them developed and like see the picture. You could take to a 1 hour photo and it was faster. Like you could see them that day still, but the turnaround time for like, what did I do? How do I fix it? And how do I get better? And then do the thing to get better was so much longer.
Yeah.
That it probably took way more time to get good at photography.
That's probably true.
Versus now it's like you take the picture, you look at the screen, you go, oh, instant correction, and then you do it again. And so it's like people nowadays have the opportunity to become way better at taking pictures faster than they did before. And I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, if you took a full day, you know, like an 8-hour shooting session and just walked around somewhere with a camera and messed with the settings, you could become adept at using the camera in probably like a day.
When I was in, some grade, I don't know, middle school, high school, whatever, my dad gave me that AE1 at that time of like, oh, you want to like learn how to take pictures and stuff. Here's my camera and here's the manual because you don't have any access to the internet because it doesn't exist, or we don't have a computer, or I don't remember when. I don't remember if we had internet at the time. And it was like, I'm like reading this old AE1 manual about like what aperture is. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like go get film and like take pictures, and like the hurdle to get over of like how to learn how to use this thing and like learn how to be take pictures and that sort of thing was so high that I just never got into it. Versus like me now, I would have totally been into it. It would have been really, really cool. But it was too much of a hurdle. And so I think that's maybe a really nice thing about digital photography that we've kind of take for granted.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I don't know. I'm just a big film guy now, Daniel.
Yeah, I can tell. Our listeners can tell too.
It's terrible. I apologize to everybody. That's the rest of my film update.
Yeah, let's close the film corner.
Yeah, close it. It's not even an official corner, Daniel.
Yeah, it's like a pillar now.
Oh, jeez. Oh, crap. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Anyways, so what is this other pre-show topic? Gotta print mad no film?
You have an extra N on the end of film too.
Filming, whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about Las Vegas.
All right. That sounds good. Quite the segue there.
You went?
I did.
And you saw the Sphere.
I did. I saw the Sphere. So I don't know how old it is. I should have looked that up before this.
This year, I think that it originally came to be sometime this fall before F1, but not long before.
Yeah.
I think it was, they were finishing up in the summer or something like that.
Yep. And we mean 2023 because people are going to be listening to this in 2024.
Oh, dear.
But yeah, it is definitely within the past year. I feel like it's been open for like 3 or 4 months, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
And you've probably seen pictures or videos of it online. It's just the big sphere-shaped
thing. So it's a big sphere, and the outside of it it's effectively a screen.
Yeah.
But what it is it's they're individual LEDs, like a giant concert screen, where it's not really small pixels. The pixels are maybe a foot apart, kind of thing. Like not a really wide pixel density, but when you look at it far away, it's like a giant screen. And so they do all kinds of silly stuff, like here's an eyeball or here's an emoji or whatever.
They had a Christmas one recently where like you could see Santa's sleigh with the reindeer like flying across this landscape.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
And then on the inside of the sphere, it has a 16K resolution screen, which like still, I mean, that's a, 40, 70, 80, 100 feet. I don't remember how big it is. It's giant screen, like bigger than an IMAX screen. And so like the pixel density is still low, but you're far enough away that it's, you can't decipher the pixels.
Yeah.
And so it's 16,000 pixels as far as, up and down. And they do shows in there. It's not the whole, I was under the impression it was the entire sphere inside, but it's not. It's just like an extra, sensory, overwhelming size screen.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, when you're sitting in there, you're sitting in like theater seats,
right?
And it basically fills almost your entire vision, but it's not behind you, like
And so you saw a show there, and I want to talk a little bit about the camera system that they use for this thing, because obviously,
of course.
So what was the show like? What was
Well, so do you want to start with the technology side of it, or do you want to start with my
I
experience?
kind of want to start a little bit with your experience to kind of
Okay.
frame the technology, because like you're in there watching this show, and it's like, is everything in focus, or are they using depth of field to like direct your eyes? Was it like you're looking over here, but the thing is happening over there, and so you kind of had to know where to look, or was it like something was happening all over the place?
Well,
Like, what did they do?
I mean, it's it's kind of a new format. I mean, in the sense that, we all know what what a regular cinema screen is like. We've seen IMAX stuff. And I mean, this is kind of like a new thing where it's much bigger. And so, I mean, you have to imagine that it's going to take some experimentation for people to figure out like what is the right way to tell stories with this type of screen, And so I don't know if the one that I saw is necessarily what everyone will do with it, but I can at least tell you what it was like for the one that I saw.
Sure.
So we watched this show that was, I think it was about 50 minutes long. And I'm not going to go way deep into the storyline of it, but it was kind of like a sci-fi thing. But
Sure.
then like ultimately it was sort of like not a history of the Earth, but kind of like a tour of the Earth. And so it had a lot
It
of...
was some story mechanism to do a lot of visuals
Exactly.
of different locations.
Yeah. And so
Very Cinerama.
they had a lot of... It was pretty Cinerama, although like I would have liked for it to have been more... Like I would have rather had less story because the visuals were the coolest part. But it had a combination of like, flying through nature scenes, time lapses in cities, and then some like traditional storytelling type things of, like here's a shot of a person up close, So it's kind of a mix of all that. In terms of like the way it looked, I mean, I was pretty impressed at how sharp it was, and just like the overall like color depth and that sort of thing. Like I had no complaints about the screen at all in terms of that. Like I was kind of thinking, yeah, it's a 16K screen, but it's also really big. And so, is it going to look kind of like soft focus or be kind of washed out or whatever? None of that. Like it looked really good.
It's those mini LEDs, man.
I guess. Yeah.
It's the future.
When the show started and all like while we were coming in and sitting down and waiting, they just had like this little like squarish screen or, rectangular, like normal size type screen lit up in the front. And I mean, like it was like maybe a little bit bigger than a movie theater, but it was like kind of that size. And I mean, I assume this was like their intent, but it kind of made me think like, is this it? Like I kind of feel a little bit lied to, It feels like this is all you get. And when the show started, that was actually like some of the show was on that little screen. Like the first part of it was on that, and I mean, it's big enough to see, but it's just kind of like, okay, I'm in a movie theater.
Yeah.
But then like they started getting into like the actual thing, and there's this moment where it just like opened up and like it went from being that little screen to being like your entire field of view, and that was pretty impactful. Like,
awesome.
That was super cool. But the show had a lot of high frame rate stuff, and like a lot of just like...
Was it in like 48 or 60p? Could you tell?
Some of it, at least some of it was. It seemed like it was, because I mean they were showing, flying through scenes, and it just looked incredibly realistic.
That always, whenever I watch like TV shows, like I haven't been able to watch what's that one with Cillian Murphy in it? Something public. It doesn't matter. It's on Netflix. But I tried to watch that show, and it's in like 60 frames per second, and I turned it on, and in like the first 5 minutes, I clocked it, and I was like, "This is in 60. This is messing with my head," and I turned it off.
I think it works better on the bigger screen though, because it feels like you're just flying through like the Grand Canyon.
I mean,
whatever.
I liked, and like people are gonna revolt. I liked the original Hobbit in 48 because like a lot of the flyover movements and a lot of the action is very, very smooth.
Yeah,
and I thought it was cool, but that was before I knew the one truth, which is 24, which is fine. This is cool.
I was also going to say that a lot of at least for the show we were watching, a lot of it was pretty deep focus. So
I think that makes sense though.
Yeah.
Like if you're showing here's a space and like you're there kind of thing, you want it to be people to be able to choose what they're looking at.
Exactly.
So super deep focus. And then you want it to be high frame rate so it looks like what they're seeing. And ideally, if you can push that to 120, you should.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're shooting these at.
Yeah,
I tried to
don't know
find that
either.
information out, but it's not super easy to decipher.
Yeah, I mean that's not something that I could easily tell, from looking at it. But Yeah, there's definitely some distortion on the, across the whole screen. Like they showed a time lapse of like an apartment building, and, anything with lines that are supposed to be straight, you can see that they kind of curve around, but you also expect that because the screen itself is curved.
Right. Maybe it kind of blends in or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't distracting or anything, but I mean, overall, super cool. It was really neat to see things in that way. And like, I felt like visually it was a notably different and better experience than a normal theater.
So let's talk about how they're doing this, like how they're shooting these things. I read a few different articles, watched some videos and stuff on like the camera and the interviews and things where they talked about the big sky camera and all this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the camera that they're using for the Sphere is built for the Sphere. And because it's not like publicly available for everyone to purchase, even though they want to sell it to Hollywood for different like avenues of filmmaking, right now it's like, this is their camera that they're using for this thing, and that's it. They built it specifically for the Sphere.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And originally the guy who's running that program, whenever he showed up of like, how are we going to do this and how are we going to shoot this? They had like 11 red cameras kind of like built around a sphere, kind of pointing into a central point. And
that's ridiculous.
The picture I have is from the Wall Street Journal, but I don't know if we can link it or not into the show notes, but it's a little nuts. It's like it's literally 11 red cameras with the same lens, kind of like circling around like a central point. And that was their original concept of like, how are we going to do this?
I mean, everything about that is just so complicated. Like, imagine powering up and dealing with 11 cameras, making sure all the settings are exactly the same.
And trying to sync them in post.
Yeah, once you get the footage,
together.
you have to stitch that together into an image. It sounds terrible.
Absolute mess. Okay, so they're like, we can't do this. So they went away with it. They went with a single sensor, single lens camera solution. And this
is completely custom, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely completely custom. It is a 3-inch by 3-inch sensor. That's, for those counting at home, bigger than an IMAX sensor, which is 65 millimeter, but then also taller because it's a square sensor, not a almost square sensor. So, because that's like, what, 72, 75 millimeters, something like that for 3 inches?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
I thought it wrote it down, but I guess I didn't.
It is 75.
And then the resolution of this thing is 316 megapixels. So that's like 17,000 pixels across, 17,000 pixels tall. And they're shooting this for a 16K screen. So like the sensor is built for the screen with like a little bit of room for cropping. And the lens that they put on this thing has an image circle that's 3 inches. So they have a 3-inch by 3-inch square sensor with a 3-inch image circle that fits perfectly inside of the thing. And that's how they're shooting this thing.
That's crazy. I mean, if you think about it, like even like that's a lot of custom hardware to make, and it's also a lot of custom software because obviously it's, this is a totally custom build, and that's we don't see that too much.
It's purposely built for this application, and it has 2 lens options, and one is a 150 degree field of view, which is absolutely nuts, and then the other one's 165 degree field of view.
Do you know what the screen is in the Sphere?
In the Sphere, it's they deliver at 150 for the screen.
Okay.
So the 165 is if they wanted to add some extra stabilization, they can kind of crop in a little bit.
I see.
Which is why like the sensor's 17, not 16. So like they have this a little bit of extra room. So they want to shoot even wider. They can do some post stabilization.
I see.
So that's why they have that little extra wide kind of one. But like those are the 2 options. And so I like went and did the math on these things. And that's the equivalent of like a 5 millimeter lens and an 8.5 millimeter lens. Or not equivalent, that is. It's not like, we're not trying to like translate this to 35. It's 5 millimeter and 8.5 millimeter.
That's crazy.
It's ridiculous. It's like, anyways. So super crazy. They didn't nowhere did they list like what the f-stop is for this thing. It's probably ridiculous. But I mean, you want everything to be sharp, you want everything to be in focus. I don't think the f-stop is what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And so I imagine that, I mean, you have this enormous sensor. So hopefully like the f-stop just super doesn't matter. You're probably trying to shoot it f30 or something if you can in order to get things actually in focus. So I am curious to know like how they're lighting stuff for this and whether or not light is an issue. Because
I wonder that too.
It seems like whenever you're designing that lens and trying to nail that aperture, which to me, it seems like this is probably a fixed aperture situation. And then you're going to crank the ISO, or, I mean, you can't add ND. Maybe they have like an ND that they can drop in front of the sensor in order to set the light. But like these are details that I want to know that no one's publishing information about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on the show we watched, a lot of it was outdoors. I mean, they were to where lighting would not have been a problem. But, I mean, maybe they would have had ND it. But like there was some indoor stuff too, though.
But if you think about, like, if they're shooting outdoors with a freaking 3-inch by 3-inch sensor, the size of a dinner plate, not really. Dinner plates aren't that big. Anyway, big old 3x3 sensor, and I mean, maybe even still, like if you're shooting like F30 or something, and you're trying to get like everything in focus, you're gonna be possibly fighting the light, right? And like if you're shooting at 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second, now you're at a 1/240 shutter speed. I don't know. It's like I think about that Barry Lyndon's Last Stroll or something. Was it Park Chan-wook? No, I'm mixing up my directors. Anyways, that movie that we talked about, like 10 episodes ago, they had to like go full lights in full daylight in order to shoot this thing. And he basically did this. He's like, we're going to shoot in 4K 120 for this whole movie, and everything's going to be in focus, and it's going to be like this surrealist 3D whatever. And this feels like something similar to that, where, how the heck are they lighting this stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
All right. Here, let me get to some little more insane things. So it does shoot 60 frames per second in 12-bit. And it will also shoot 120 frames per second in 10-bit, which those are some pretty good read speeds for a sensor that big.
No kidding.
And obviously, like in order to read something that fast that's that big, they're just dumping raw, right? Like they're pulling off the sensor. And so what they're doing is that they can decouple the image capture, like similar to that, whatever the SI, was it SI1?
Something like that, yeah.
The one for Slumdog, where they're decoupling like the sensor piece capture camera from the data processing, and apparently they can run a cable between these two things up to like a mile or something.
Wow,
which is a little nuts.
Yeah,
but this thing is doing 500 gigabits per second off of the camera, and that fiber that they're running between is like 400 gigabit or whatever for the fiber, and it's essentially doing 50 gigabytes per second of data capture. And that's dropping down into these like custom media mags that are like built for, acquiring data that fast and storing it. And so they're 32 terabyte media mags. And so they can do like, I forget what it is. It's like 40 minutes of footage or something silly.
Yeah, your notes here say 17 minutes of footage.
Okay, yeah, I can't read my notes and talk at the same time. Thank you. So it's 17 minutes of footage, which is going to be 32 terabytes per card.
That's ridiculous. I was thinking about it when I read this after watching the show, but because they did some time lapses, but I guess for a time lapse, they probably did just like take a photo, basically.
Oh, yeah, sir. I'm sure they
weren't just recording it as video because they wouldn't have been able to.
I can't imagine how expensive this is.
Well, and think about the editing. I mean, just dealing with that much footage and all that mess.
I mean, I don't know if your whatever Mac Pro with its M2 Ultra can handle this.
It's crazy.
You need so many GPUs.
Yeah, you need some proxies for that.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's just insane data off of this thing, and crazy resolution on like the lens. It's just this wild custom built camera that's like one of a kind. I assume they have more than one.
I was wondering that. I wonder how many exist.
I am also curious how many exist. And they're like toying with, okay, what can we do to like make money with this thing? Or is there like doing like flyover shots for movies? This would be kind of perfect if you can shoot those in like 60 FPS or 120, and you could do some really crazy high resolution kind of flyovers. And I think that's maybe one of the things they're trying to sell Hollywood on, and like trying to get them to rent this camera or whatever. But
yeah, because it's pretty niche. I mean, there's only one Sphere in existence right now. Surely they plan on building others if it's successful. There were a lot of people there, and tickets aren't cheap or anything. So I'm sure they're making money on what they've got, but they've also got a really expensive, Vegas is not cheap. I'm sure their lease is pretty high. And I mean, it's going to put a ceiling on what they can do with it if they only ever use it for this one thing. So you would assume they would want to use that camera for other things.
Right. Yeah. It seems like a pretty big investment. I mean, they built this whole thing, and then they
Mhm.
got this. Geez, how much do you think this camera costs,
Yeah.
Daniel?
I mean,
one
it's-
of a kind, developed, purpose built camera.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really say priceless because I'm sure they paid somebody to make it, and that had a cost. But like, yeah, I mean, it's you're not going to sell these to people, so I don't know.
To me, it's got to be like, I'm just guessing, but I would say somewhere between 100 and a quarter million.
Yeah,
If probably
At
cost for this
least.
thing at least, and
Yeah.
like they got to make up that money, Daniel. That's why your
Mhm.
tickets are so expensive.
mm-hmm. Yep.
It would be interesting to see what they do with this thing. Of like, we're gonna apply it to rent it out for this crazy movie or whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure that like James Cameron or Michael Bay would be
Mhm.
interested in doing something insane with this. Though I think they were talking about like building a case to shoot underwater with it. And, like they're not quite there yet, but that's one of the goals is to do underwater stuff, which that would be
That'd be pretty cool.
nuts.
Yeah.
And like James Cameron
No,
is
he'd be all about that.
if the Sphere people went to him and said, those like weird underwater like bottom of the ocean documentaries you did, do you want to do that again in 16K for our Sphere stuff? I mean, come on.
yeah. He's just looking for an excuse.
Yep,
Like-
exactly.
Like the man owns his own submarine.
Yeah. You're like, can I strap it to my sub? Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I'm gonna call it that. That's gonna happen probably.
Yeah, I think
But
you're right.
it'd be cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, I love like the custom built camera technology whenever they do these
Yeah.
purpose built things. So,
The thing we watched did have some underwater shots in it.
oh, it did.
Now I'm wondering if that was real or
Maybe the articles I read were farther behind,
maybe.
and they finally have cracked the code,
Yep. I don't know.
the underwater code,
Yep.
the
Just
aqua
a
code.
big, just a big plexiglass box.
I mean, maybe.
Just wrap it in saran wrap,
Mhm.
really tight.
I assume that they would have the data acquisition piece not in the water
Yeah.
with the camera piece itself, but I mean, you could liquid cool it at that point.
There you go.
I don't know what the cooling situation is for this. This camera is enormous. I don't know if you saw. There's a
I couldn't really
picture-
tell how big it was.
If you look it up, there's pictures of this thing on a helicopter. It's bigger than a helicopter. That's not true. But it's kind of enormous.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too because some of they did a lot of flyover shots and like they didn't put this on a drone, so
Oh no, it's definitely on a helicopter.
yeah, pretty cool.
Inspired too.
It's just some guy running with it over his head.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think
That's
it's kind of cool.
is.
I've been wanting to talk about it a little bit for a while, and I thought this was a good opportunity since
Yeah.
you had a chance to see the show.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm curious to see, like a year from now, how this is looking. How many shows have been released
Bankrupt.
for it. Well, you have to wonder, right? Like, I mean, it's really popular right now, but they're gonna have to keep releasing new shows for it. People are gonna have to basically make movies for this thing.
Yep.
Because otherwise, like, you can get a lot of the cool factor of it by looking at it from the outside.
Yeah.
Like, seeing all the neat stuff on the outside is really fun, but that's not making them money. So
No.
they need people to come in and see it. You need shows to be produced for this thing. But, like, are they going to be able to fund that? And are they going to be able to get, like big directors or whoever to actually make movies for this thing? I think that's an open question.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see.
Yep.
The whole like, especially seeing it at night outside, just reminds me so much of like Blade Runner 2049.
Oh yeah, the whole thing really feels like this weird, like it's like you're stepping into the future. I mean, when you see it from the outside, and you're walking in, and then when you go in, I mean, besides the theater itself, they have this big atrium area, and they've got like this hologram thing and like some robot stuff, and like it feels like a kind of like a science museum sort of deal, but like it's clear that they're trying to make it feel like the future. And it kind of does
Interesting.
feel like the future. So that's clearly like the vibe they're going for with this whole thing.
Wild.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have a segue for the next thing.
Yeah.
Hit me with your best segue, Daniel.
Now for something completely different. I don't have anything either.
All right, just play the let's take a break button, and then we'll take a break.
That's a good call. We've got to work on these segues, Lucas. I don't feel like we're very professional podcasters today.
There was that one episode where I nailed it,
Yeah.
and I feel like because I can't do any better that I shouldn't try.
Yeah. Lightning never strikes twice in the same spot.
What's it called when like that was my magnum opus. So-
Totally passed us by. We just really missed out on that one.
Yep, and now it's just all downhill from here.
Mhm.
Yep.
All right, what's next?
Okay, I want to talk, kind of maybe get a little heady here and talk about how you hold your camera.
Yeah, I'm thinking really what this is that everyone listening to this is probably holding their camera wrong.
I mean, I don't know.
It'd be a good clickbait title, though, right?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
You're holding your camera
Yes,
wrong.
you specifically.
You out there, we see you in your red shirt, sitting on your couch, holding your camera wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anyway, so I got a camera strap for Christmas.
Ooh.
It's not that exciting.
Okay.
It is a camera strap that I wanted. You shot a Christmas Eve service and had 2 cameras with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it might be interesting. Like, obviously there's camera bags, which, oh boy, Daniel.
We've covered that, and I'm sure there will be more episodes where we cover more.
You got
camera
an
bags.
extra hour. Anyway, I don't want to talk about camera bags necessarily. I want to talk about like how, like, are you different ways that people are kind of approaching camera holding, and like maybe advantages and disadvantages, and like what's the right situation? Because a lot of these things I can imagine myself using all different types of systems,
Sure, yeah.
and it really feels like the type of situation.
I agree.
And I kind of wanted to, I don't know, get into a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so
Sounds good.
going to talk a little bit first about, like, what are you thinking about whenever you're talking about how am I going to strap in to my camera system or whatever, and like how many cameras do I have? I don't know. And then like material and that sort of thing. So I was like, to me, the first thing is safety. Like, and not for me, but for my camera. I'm not the most dexterous person in the world, and so I drop things, and I will absolutely drop a camera. It's not beyond me. And so like I feel like for me, going like bare camera is never an option.
Interesting. I'm not that way at all. Like there are times where I care about the safety of it. And like if I'm holding my camera over like a steep drop off to where I would literally not be able to recover the camera, then I probably have a strap on it. But and I remember when I first got into photography and when I first got my camera, it was like anytime I used it, I wanted to have some kind of strap or something on it. Mm-hmm. And now I am not that way at all. And most of the time when I use my camera, no strap, no nothing. I just pick it up and use it.
Nice.
And
no
so
fear.
For me, I think my main consideration is more about like the freedom of use to where like I want it to stay out of my way. And what, if I'm hiking or something, then that means I probably do want some type of camera strap because I don't want to have to hold it the whole time. So like, that's like where the freedom would come from. Or like, sometimes I'm in a situation where I know I'm going to want the camera, but then I'm going to need to be able to do something else with my hands. So it's like, obviously I need a way to like drop the camera and have that be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more of a priority to me over like being afraid of dropping the camera.
I think that makes sense. The other things to consider maybe here that we'll kind of get into is like, how are you attaching to like what does that look like? And are they fixed anchors or swivel anchors or whatever? Because like getting that cord, like getting your strap like wrapped around itself. So whenever I first got into doing photography, oh boy, I said it. Oh no, Daniel, cut that out. When I first started like taking pictures and that sort of thing, getting into cameras, I had just had a strap. I bought like a strap off of Amazon, which was probably a terrible strap that had no real rigidity to it, and the seams were probably going to break, and it was probably a bad idea. I mean, it worked out for a while. I had like for years, but it was just like you run it through the eyelets and then like you feed the tail back into itself. And so it was like fixed to the camera. It was not easy to take on and off, and it was just going to be on there.
Yep.
And I would like throw it over my shoulder sometimes to like carry it quickly, but that was annoying because like it wasn't easy to adjust. It was basically like a fixed length. I didn't like putting it around my neck because the camera was too heavy. And for me, like if you're putting a camera on your neck, like I want the camera to like stay where it is. If it's got a long lens on it and it starts like tilting down away from your body, it's just uncomfortable.
You would think that, like just get a camera strap. Like, what does it matter? Like anything's fine. But all these things you're describing, like that's why it matters, because the specific design of these things and the material it's made out of and all of that is going to affect like not just the comfort, but also the usability of it.
Oh, for sure. And so for me, like my first camera strap situation, what I ended up doing was like I had the strap on it, and like if I'm from A to B, I may like throw it on my shoulder real quick, but my main use was I would put my hand through the strap and I would wrap the strap around my wrist, and then I would hold the camera. And
Yeah,
so
like you basically shorten up all the slack.
yeah, and like essentially I used a camera strap as a cuff and like wrapped it around my wrist. But like the because it didn't have like pivoting connections to the eyelets on the camera, and because they weren't easy to detach, it was just like a tangled mess.
Yeah.
And that was how I used my camera for I think like a year or two whenever
Yeah.
I first got into cameras.
Yep. And I mean, I think a lot of people do that when you're just getting into it and when it's really just a hobby. You're not using it that much and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it, and maybe you just don't know any better.
What were you doing back when you got your was it a D80?
I had a D40, a
D40.
Nikon D40. It was my first fancy camera. And I did use the strap for that, but I just used the one that came with it. So it's a pretty basic.
As do most, maybe.
Yeah, probably so. And I think I didn't actually like learn the trick of wrapping it around my wrist. I didn't really use that. So I mostly put it around my neck.
Yeah, which I feel like around your neck, unless you have like a really good like padded strap, is maybe not preferable.
No, I don't think so.
I know, and we can talk about like how are you holding your strap, I guess. And so I feel like if like around the neck for like my Hymatic AF2, that thing it hangs perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, this is a neck strap situation. I need to get like a super adorable short strap that holds it like right at my chest and I can just like pop up. It would be amazing. So like neck, I'm coming around on neck straps as far as like getting something that's not super thin. Like it's got to be thick enough to be comfortable. But if you have the right camera with a short lens, like a point and shoot, I feel like neck straps are great.
Yeah, having a short lens is the critical part of that. And the other part I think is, to me, it kind of depends on, how heavy the camera is and what you're going to be doing when you don't have the camera in your hands.
Yeah.
So like there could be times where having the camera on your chest is annoying, like when you're not using it.
But if it's a statement piece, like if it's a
It's a
like
piece
it's a
of flair.
Q3, I mean, you want that right there. Because then you're going to see people when they try to steal it from you.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so like there's a neck option, which has never been something that I've been super into until like I started getting into film photography, and now I'm going to become a neck strap person.
Oh my gosh.
And that's going to be a whole. It's terrible, Daniel. I wish one of us could stop me.
Neither of us can. It's an unstoppable force.
Anyway, so the other thing, like you can go shoulder.
Yeah, like crossbody.
No, like just like hang it on your shoulder, and then like
okay.
it's like that's how you carry it.
I
and
don't
then,
like that.
Oh
no.
boy, it just slips off.
Yeah,
right?
it just falls off.
There are like
Not cool.
So the strap that I got for Christmas is that Peak. It's the Peak design, obviously. I don't think it's like the strap light. I think it's just like the regular strap, not the leash.
Okay.
And so it's like an inch and a half thick, and it has rubber on one side and not rubber on the other. And so like if you are going to put it on your shoulder, it won't like slide off. So
that's how
much.
my Peak design one is. Maybe I have the same one.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of nice. But generally speaking, like the on one shoulder, it just doesn't really stay on. Maybe I just don't have thick enough shoulders.
I don't think it stays on very well, and I don't think that it's not great if you want to be able to leave the strap on and use the camera. Like, like it's kind of a weird position, I guess, to like pull the camera up to your face when it's on one shoulder.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. So then like in the same situation of like it's just a normal strap, you can go crossbody with it.
Yeah.
You can just like do it crossbody. And I think that kind of works, but and then you're like swiveling the strap up in order to like pick it up and
But
take
what
pictures.
I do like about that is that when you're not using the camera, it hangs down at your side. And so, like you have the area in front of you clear. I also think that works better if you have a longer lens on the camera.
Right. So, and that kind of brings the concept of how are you attaching to the camera? And so it's obviously like there's the eyelets that are on it, but a lot of these strap solutions come with a tripod base connection, which I always find annoying because I'm like, well, what if I want to put a tripod plate on there? But like the Peak Design capture clip and other solutions sometimes have like a little spot to like thread a strap through so you can use it for both. And so I have like put one of those little anchor eyelets on my Peak Design capture clip in order to be able to use the base plate as an anchor point, but then also use it as the capture clip method.
Yeah.
And so, but like if you have like a really long lens on there, hanging it from one eyelet and from the tripod base may get you into a lens pointing down but more stable, like hung configuration compared to if you were trying to put it on both eyelets and then it's kind of trying to teeter from the top
Yeah.
and turn up.
I think so too. Yeah. And it may feel stronger too. It kind of depends on how the camera's designed. Like the cameras that have the little circular eyelet and then they have like a split metal ring.
Mhm.
I hate that style.
Oh yeah,
Like
jeez.
the XT30's like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate those because I'm always afraid that thing's going to break or that the strap's going to fall out of it or whatever. And so with one of those, I'd much rather have a base plate solution.
Yeah, I've never fully trusted the putting the anchor into the tripod for like the primary mount location. Always, some of those will have like an extra tie around to the eyelet as like a safety catch.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. As far as like attaching to the camera, like I'm never okay with just base plate, but usually it's like one eyelet or both, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I feel like most people, when you're looking at someone's camera, they're going to have those little anchors hanging off of it.
Yeah, like the
those
little peak
design anchor
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. It's just so easy because then you get the quick release. Like the problem with your original strap that you used was you said like you have to feed it through the eyelet and then feed it back through the strap. And I mean, you can't remove that very easily. And those peak design things are great because you can pop the strap off if you don't want it on there.
It feels like those little anchors have become ubiquitous in the
Mhm.
photography community. And I was looking to see like what alternates are out there. I mean, there's people who are still hard connecting to their camera without having a quick release. And it looks like there's maybe a few different options out there. You know those remember playing guitar with those pins that you could like push in? For
Yeah,
a quick-
strap lock.
Yeah, strap lock. You can get those for your camera, something similar, which I would feel a little uneasy about how those connect because you could definitely like hit that button and that thing would go. But you can get those, and there's also ones that use just like a straight up buckle, like a
plastic buckle.
like a plastic buckle as a quick detach
I
option.
don't know
which,
about that.
Yeah, I'm not super into that either. It's kind of big, kind of bulky.
Because that's the other thing. Like when you don't have the strap on there, you want something that's not like this huge thing hanging off your camera.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's where the peak design things are good because it's very small.
Yeah, for me, as far as connecting any sort of strapping system to your camera, the Peak Design anchors and eyelets are the clear winner.
Yeah.
As far as like
They
different
lock in
options.
really securely. You can remove them easily, but you're never going to accidentally pop that thing out. And I mean, yeah, pretty much like the only thing you could ever be worried about with those is the little tiny thread breaking.
Sure, and like that, and those fray. Like if you see any sort of different color, like if you have a black one, and you see red, it's time to replace them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They do kind of have a built-in wear indicator, which is good.
They do, yeah. So that's great. And like check your eyelets, right? That's always the thing. Is like just check them periodically. Does that lock you into Peak Design straps?
I don't know if it does or not.
I mean, most Peak Design straps have the anchor piece kind of built in.
Mhm.
There are third-party straps that are compatible with, but I can't remember if you can just buy those like base anchors to
Oh.
use with other straps.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
I know. I'll have to look that up later. But I guess that would be the big detractor as far as like I like the Peak Design option the most, but if it's like not the strap that you want, like you want
Yeah.
some sort of fancy leather or something, or you want to use a moneymaker, like maybe you can't use the Peak Design.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we've like beat the different ways to do like standard strap to death. What about material? Like what do you prefer your straps to be made out of?
Well, the Peak Design one that I normally use is I think it's like a seatbelt type material,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that. So I like I don't like the rope style straps because to me, if I'm using a strap, like I want it to be really comfortable when I'm wearing it,
Mm-hmm.
and I just feel like the rope would kind of like bite into my shoulder a little bit, especially with a heavier lens. So I don't think I'd like that. I like the seatbelt material because it's flexible, but it's wide enough to kind of distribute that force.
Right.
And that's probably also the issue that I would have with something like leather is I want the strap to not get in my way and not feel like stiff and not flexible.
I do think that leather is a good material for strap systems just because of its durability.
It
You
is
do want
durable.
something that's going to hold up. You mentioned like seatbelt material. You actually buy old seatbelts that have been repurposed as camera straps, which is
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of cool.
sure you can.
My biggest issue is always the width. I love the way the little rope straps look, but that point load, like on your neck or on your shoulder or whatever, is probably going to be not great.
Yeah, unless your camera's really lightweight.
But even still, like it feels like it wears on you over time. Versus those wider straps are more comfortable.
Yeah.
Like my Canon E1 is heavier than my Himatic F2, but the strap on the A1 is like 1.5 inches, and the one on the AF2 is like 1 centimeter. And it is more tiresome to hang the AF2 around my neck than it is the AE1.
Yeah.
And it's just purely because of that weight distribution, which is why I need to get another strap for my Hymatic camera. Anyway, so like it's picking the right material. Like you want it to be like leather or canvas or nylon or like sailcloth or something. And so it's going to hold up, and especially if you're wearing like heavy gear, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But all right, so like we're connecting with anchors. Like maybe you're using a strap. What are other ways? Like I kind of want to get into your shooting situation and talking about like how are you managing multiple cameras and like the other ways of, because like obviously strap, right? Like those that's a go-to method, but what are other things that you can do that aren't necessarily a camera strap?
Yeah, well, and for me, like this is not a common problem for me, but recently I was shooting some Christmas Eve events, and it's kind of like the typical wedding photographer thing where I know I'm going to want some wide shots and some tight shots. I don't want to have to constantly be changing lenses. I happen to have 2 Fuji cameras, and so it's like, well, I'm just going to use both of these cameras, and I'll put the Tamron 17-70 on my X-T30 and have that be my wide shooter, and then I'll put either the 50-140 or the Viltrox 75 1.2 on the X-H2S and use that for tight shots. And so I've got 2 cameras. I want to be able to carry both of them. And for me, that was a new challenge. I haven't ever had to do that before. And so the way I approached it was the X-H2S with the long lens. I just used my Peak Design strap, which I think it may be the leash. I don't know. The leash and the strap are very similar, but I used one of those things and ran that one crossbody, which worked out well for me because, like, especially with the 50-140, it's a really long lens, and it hung pretty well at my side, and so I could just like let that hang down at my right side when I wasn't using it, and it stayed out of the way. And then for the X-T30, had the Tamron 17-70 on it, which is a annoyingly long, physically long lens. For that, I used a Peak Design capture clip on my belt on the left side. So if I wasn't holding either camera, I had the X-H2S hanging off of a strap, like down like by my right hip, and the X-T30 on my belt on the left side. And so it's kind of a nice balanced setup.
It seems like a pretty good hybrid approach where it's like strap on one side, clip on the other, kind of managing 2 cameras. It seems like people who are shooting events are like sometimes they're mixing and matching, but the different ways that you can approach this is like you can do a clip system to like clip your camera in. You can do a harness system where it's like you have a literal harness that has like 2 cameras hanging, or you can do like what's it called? Not a holster, but like a one-sided harness, basically, or a sling, I guess is the word I'm looking for, where it's similar to a strap, but it is purely meant to be like a crossbody system that has a slide, so that when you pick up the camera, it slides all the way up.
Yep.
And I feel like depending upon what you're shooting, if you need to like go overhead or need more freedom of movement, maybe you're going to prefer like a clip solution over a harness or a strap solution.
Yeah, maybe so.
And I was diving into these clip options, and like it seems like the leading options are obviously like the capture clip from Peak Design, which people will shy away from because of its orientation. Like if you put it on like a backpack strap, the camera locks from top to bottom to like slide in. But if you put it on your belt, it's sideways.
That's that's how it was for me.
And so maybe that's like a little weird as far as like how am I orientating the lens and like how easy is it to get out, and is there any concern about it sliding out?
Yeah.
And then they also make this like fabric piece where you can like put it's like a 2-inch wide piece of fabric that flips over your belt or over a waist strap or whatever, and then you basically clamp the capture clip to it so you can have it in a vertical position, and you can kind of like have it hanging a little lower than your belt if you need to.
Yeah, I think I would probably do that next time, just because it was like I wasn't really worried about it falling out. I mean, for one thing, like if I broke that Tamron 17-70, it'd maybe be more of a blessing than a curse. But for me, I honestly, though, wasn't super worried about that setup. It was my cheaper camera and, a lens that I just don't like quite as much. And that was part of it. But honestly, the most annoying aspect of it was that it was just a little bit hard to line up and get in. There were a couple of times where I was trying to clip it back on, And it took me like a few tries to line it up perfectly and get it to lock in. And it would have been nicer probably to be able to drop it in from the top.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And so, but like, if you're doing that to like get it into a down position, like hanging off your belt, I've had those screws get a little loose sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the trick here is to put thread lock on your capture clip screws.
Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So
yeah.
that's my main advice for capture clip users.
I had mine really tight because I was using it on a reinforced belt, and I could it took me a while to get the screws to actually lock on well enough, and so I like really cranked them down. And I think that because it had so much tension on it, I think that actually probably helped it hold in a little bit.
Okay.
But also throughout the day, I definitely checked them periodically to make sure they weren't loosening up.
I like the capture clip for its versatility. The Peak Design sling bag that I have has straps on the side of it specifically for you to mount a capture clip to. And I really like, for me, having the sling bag to like have my lenses as a go-to changing location for lenses, and then I can like clip my camera to it as as a quick like set aside kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will say, like, as we talk about the capture clip and some of these other solutions, I do really like this as an option, especially if you're in a situation where you're using two cameras and you think you're going to be using one more than the other. So for me, with my shooting, the camera that I thought I was going to be using most was my tight, the X-H2S with the tighter lens on it. And so I had that on the strap because I feel like that gives me more flexibility and like I'm holding it, and so it's easy. The clip, though, I feel like really holds the camera securely at your side or on your backpack strap or however you have it. And so I feel like if that camera is most of the time going to be on the clip and not in your hands, I do kind of prefer that over a strap because I feel like it's not swinging around as much, it's not getting in the way, and I think that's a benefit to that approach.
I think that is one of the reasons that people will favor towards a clip system, whether it's like clipping to your chest or clipping on your belt. Another option out there is the Spider holster. Did you look at this thing?
I did look at that thing. It looks ridiculous.
It looks almost like a gun holster as far as it has this padding that swings down, and it has this like metal attachment system, and like you buckle in like you're wearing this thing. You're not just like attaching it to your belt.
Yep.
And it supports the camera with a lens pointing backwards and the body of the camera down.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
And that's the only way that it works. And like you see this guy using it in their picture, and he's like Clint Eastwood down here with his hand, like fingers just wiggling, right? Whip this thing out, and like some people really like these because they are like just stable and the camera's there and it goes in the one way, and you can either like it basically sits into this. Like if you imagine a pin and like a metal slide where you just slot it in.
Yeah.
You can choose to lock that or not lock that. And so if you're shooting an event, you're not worried people like grabbing your camera, or you're not like going to like do a bunch of jumping up and down. You can just like pick it up and set it into this holster, like a holster, like shink, shink, and you're taking it in and out.
It could be good for long lenses too, because with that, even with mine where I had it on my belt with the X-T30 and that 17-70, I noticed that if I like knelt down on the ground, like if I wanted to take a low shot, the camera lens, like the end of the lens was like an inch from the ground.
And that 17-70 will slowly zoom itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you have to worry about that a little bit. Like if I had a longer lens or if I had the lens hood on it, I would have been bonking that thing on the ground like crazy.
Geez,
so having it point backwards might have been better.
Good reason to have a lens hood on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this seems pretty cool. I think I read a review on the Spider holster, and the guy was like, I use two of them because I can like dual wield my cameras, but like sometimes I'll have to do a different solution if I'm going to be in a situation where there's narrow doorways, because these things don't really like give one way or the other.
I had that problem with mine. Like, you're suddenly wider than you're used to being. And, I don't fit down that aisle, or I don't fit between those people as well.
Yeah. So I guess that's the trade-off. Like a clip system is fixed to you, whereas the strap system, like you can kind of maneuver the cameras in and out, but they're swinging around.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of like dual camera, like wedding photographers and that sort of thing, are using a harness. And I think like the more well-known ones are like the Holdfast Moneymaker, where it's like this leather like strap system, and then it's like literally it's like harnesses, and like you have two things hanging down, they're connected to the tripod plates, and you look like I don't know, a wedding photographer.
Yeah. I mean, those things are not cheap, and it's like very fancy looking.
They are very fancy looking.
Like your dress camera harness.
There was, I don't remember if it's Holdfast or if it was Black Rabbit or if it was somebody else, but they make what they call a lens quiver.
Mm-hmm.
And the harness itself, which is, I mean, like it's like you're putting on a vest of leather straps, and then you have these two cameras hanging down, and like those leashes can then, they have like rings on them so they can slide up and down the harness whenever you're picking them up. But that strap system has more rings on it, and you can mount this lens quiver in front of you or behind you so that you can use it as a quiver for your lenses.
That's crazy.
The review I watched for it, he was like, let me explain to you what a quiver is. Archery. And I'm like, come on, man. Don't do this right now.
I don't know about that.
And so he explained what quivers were. And then he was like, and now look what's in my quiver. And he had like a Leica Q2 and then a bunch of other stuff. Like, here's my iPad, here's my phone, here's some pens. And I'm like, what are we doing right now? I thought you were trying to sell me a thing to like take my lenses in and out really fast because I'm a super cool wedding photographer. No, it's just like another bag. And he's like, you clip it to your harness. And it's pretty much ridiculous thing.
I will say, like, just as a very quick aside, I mean, I haven't done as much event photography as some people, and I'm not a wedding photographer, but I do think that if you're in a situation where you're trying to switch between like 5 different lenses, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yep.
Like you have the 2 cameras where you can have 2 lenses on it. Maybe you have a 3rd lens that gives you some different thing, but like it's really easy to get too distracted with switching between lenses, and you're probably going to miss shots if you're trying to do all that. So that products like that make me a little nervous in that I think they kind of reinforce bad behaviors. Yeah,
to me, it's if you're doing an event, if you can get away with 2 zooms, 2 bodies, 2 zooms, and you're set, maybe. And like if you're going to add a 3rd lens, like adding a 3rd body might be tough.
Yeah, I don't know where you carry it.
Yeah, I mean, you could like clip it on your chest and then like have your, I don't know, like maybe you have a harness and like the harness has like, you can put a capture clip on the chest and then you can have the 2 things on the side. But having like the one lens in like this little pouch off to the side that you can easily swap, maybe that's the solution. Maybe but you're right. Like,
because I was
minimize lens changes.
I was using the 75 1.2 a lot just because of the wide aperture. And I was shooting in a dark room and I was getting much better shots at that wide aperture just because I could get more light. But it was like I was switching my XH2S between that and the 50 to 140 for more reach sometimes, like pretty infrequently. Like I switched probably twice the whole day. I switched to the 5140 for a while and then back to the 75 and that was it. And then the other camera was just on the 17 to 70 the whole time. But I've fallen into that trap before where I've showed up at an event with 4 lenses and I've spent more time thinking about, which lens should I use now? And, it's like I'm there playing with my camera instead of capturing the event.
Yeah, and that's all event stuff, right? I mean, if you're like going to go for a hike or something and your goal is like take a bunch of pictures, I mean, that's a whole different solution. You're probably bringing a bag and this sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Which kind of makes me want to talk a little bit about my main solution. Like I've talked about how I want to go with maybe like a neck strap for some of these other cameras. Sometimes if I'm going with like just one camera and one lens and I want to go really minimal, I'll do a strap, which is one of the reasons why I was gifted this strap for Christmas. Is like it's easy, you can crossbody it, you can neck it or whatever, and it's kind of versatile but a little more comfortable than like the leash that I have. But I would say most of the time I'm using a crossbody bag, like something that's small and easy, and I have one camera and 2 lenses in it, and I have the cuff. I have the Peak Design cuff and I'll put it on my wrist. And like, if I'm going to switch between cameras, I'll just like unclip it and clip it on, or I'll clip the camera off, leave the cuff on and put the camera in my bag.
Yeah. And I like that cuff a lot. It has a little magnet in it. So it actually holds the end of the cuff to your wrist.
Yeah. You can kind of like wrap it around and like leave it on your wrist if you need to.
Yeah.
So I would say like using the cuff has been my main method of camera body attachment. And that's it. It's like I'm going to have my little bag with me, and then when I'm going to shoot, I'm going to pull the thing out and I'm going to have the cuff on. And that's essentially it.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. I don't use my cuff as much anymore just because most of the times when I would use it, I just use the camera without anything, like without any sort of strap system. But I like the cuff because it's pretty unobtrusive.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And then we talked a lot about the capture clip, but that's my main, like if I'm going backpacking, I'll clip it to my strap, and just wear the camera on my chest and that kind of thing instead of trying to stuff everything into my backpack.
Yeah. Well, I like that too, because then the camera is right there. So if you want to take a picture, you're not like, hey, everybody, let's like stop so I can pull this out of my bag. And, it's right there. You can get to it easily. But when you're not using it, it's not swinging around, getting in your way and all that.
Yeah. So do we talk about basically everything here? Like we talked about kind of like harnesses and wearing it at your hip and like maybe the detraction of not being able to like lift the camera, and so you're kind of tied down, but it works as a sling. When like using a strap might be good, when using a cuff might be good. And for me, it's like a cuff is good if I'm using a bag, and a strap is good if I'm not using a bag, and maybe like that's the difference. But anything else we want to talk about as far as like how you're connecting or how you're like using your carrying?
What do you think of those like the micro clutch and like those things where it's basically a strap that's like tight along the side of the camera and you just like thread your fingers through it?
Yeah, I guess that's a really good one that we haven't covered yet. I know my dad was really into the body grip stuff. He never really wanted to use a strap because it was confining, right? If you have a camera on strap on your body and you're trying to take a picture of like this thing over, like you're trying to move the camera away from your body or overhead or whatever, you maybe have to like take it off, and it's annoying.
Yep.
And so what he would do, he had a grip, which was like this cover thing that went over, and you like slide your hand into it and it wraps around your hand and like holds your camera to your hand. And I hate those things. I can't. They're restrictive and weird, and like basically locking your hand onto the grip. And I'm rarely wanting to use the camera where I'm holding it correctly, which is maybe go back to see the first part of this discussion where I said that I might drop it.
Yep. That explains a lot.
I mean, I am frequently like on my X-T3 hitting the shutter button with my thumb. Not going to explain how.
I will say the one time I think those things are useful is if for some reason your camera's really heavy.
Sure.
So we both sometimes run a wireless camera for doing live broadcast stuff. And the camera that we're using for that right now is a Sony a7 III with a cage and with a Teradek and a battery on top of it. And so that's like a really heavy camera. And the a7 III does not have a very substantial grip. And the very first time we used that setup, I used it just plain with nothing. And my hand was hurting at the end of the night because I was trying to hold that thing up. And so I happened to have one of those Peak Design, I think it's the clutch. It's not the micro clutch, but it's like you fit like 3 or 4 fingers through it. And I put that on there, and it just instantly made it better because I could relax my right hand grip, but still have something holding some of that weight up. So I think that's the one case where I would use one of those.
Yeah, that's no joke. We did some trip out to like Gatlinburg a little while back, and I was doing what I basically talked about. It's like I have a sling and I have my camera, and I had the cuff, and like kind of walking around, I didn't want to like keep taking my camera in and out of my bag. Strap would have probably been the right solution for this situation, but I was doing what I normally do. And so I'm just kind of like holding the camera in my right hand most of the day. And yeah, that gets really tiring because like usually if I have the cuff on, I'm holding the camera. I'm not actually like gripping it because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
I'm more of like balancing it on 2 fingers and kind of just like holding it, right? It's cuffed in, it's fine. But like my ring finger and my middle finger were just so tired and sore at the end of the day from just like holding this stupid thing. And like the hand trap would have been perfect for that. It would have, you can have a little loosen up a little bit, but you have it a little more secure. So
yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the theme of all this is there's a time and place for all these things.
Right.
And I think even just kind of understanding what's out there and being open to like changing up your setup depending on what you're doing, I think is really valuable. Like the thing that I was talking about with my capture clip and the strap was something I've never done before, but it worked out really well for what I was doing. And I think that, maybe if I did it again, I would try and learn from what I did and make some small tweaks to the setup. But it's like, that's not what I do most of the time because I don't normally need 2 cameras and I'm not normally in that situation. But for that situation, that was the right choice. And that's kind of the theme of a lot of this stuff. Yeah,
I think that absolutely covers it. And with that said, I want you to tell me what the situation is where you would use this nice cam carry harness Olympus system that I put in the show notes here. If you can open up this link.
So what I'm looking at here is I mean, this looks like this person's wearing like a small version of a bulletproof vest. And it's just strapped on, and there's a camera mounted on the front of it. And I mean, it's not a utility belt, but it's like a combat vest for photography.
Yep. It has a similar mounting situation to the Spider thing.
Yeah.
But instead it's this front and back vest solution that you like cinch yourself into, and then you can like shunk and put the camera like on your chest.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm kind of past the point of judging people for how they do this, because maybe there's a situation that makes sense. But
I mean, maybe there is, Daniel. I'm thinking like if you're wearing a moneymaker and you got a camera on the left and a camera on the right and a quiver at your waist and you need a third camera, maybe this is the solution because your hips are taken up. So then you gotta like put this bad boy right here. You probably put capture clips on the shoulder pieces for that. And you could put 2 more cameras on this thing.
I don't know about that. I just don't know.
But five bodies.
It kind of reminds me of the Easy Rig for video, though, where it's like this huge. That's the thing that you strap it on, and you have like a scorpion. You have this big thing over your head that with a cable that comes down and holds the camera. And I love making fun of that thing, but I can also understand why you would use it.
Oh,
and
for sure.
I'm sure this is the same. I'm sure there's a reason for it.
There's so many weird, silly looking like attachment solutions of people trying to solve the problem of like, for this very specific situation, how am I going to hold my camera?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I feel like every single one of these things has a time and a place, and it's cool to know like what your options are and kind of optimizing for what those things are.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool.
I do have one last thing though. I did want to know what you think of this Clever Supply Co. IOE camera strap, where they've got like these 2 lengths. You can get it in a short or a medium length, and it kind of seems like what you would do with your film camera, where you say, or you're like a Q3 where you want it on your chest as a display piece. But look at this picture, this camera strap, and this guy's wearing 2 of them, and he's got the short one and the medium one, and he's got 2 cameras hanging there in front of him. What do you think about that?
I mean, you do you, right? Like maybe you need to. I'm thinking in this situation, maybe you got like a Canon Auto Boy, and then you have like a Fuji Natura, which are 2 very different price point cameras. And maybe one of them has some like Ilford in it. Like you're shooting black and white in one. The other one, maybe you're shooting like Porta 400, nice color stock. And you want to be able to use both and have them easily accessible, but you need your hands free. And then here's the situation, right? You got a short strap, you got a long strap, and you just wear them both around your neck.
And so, like we said, I guess there's a strap for every situation.
Yep.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com. And you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.